Now we have time for a few questions for both Yasha and Guy.
Okay.
It is somewhat brave. I know it's a hard time after lunch. So I can skip. I think that's what's happening this panel currently. I will address it for both of you, and I think both of you gave us a very, guys, you started with like a perspective, a historian perspective of how knowledge shapes maybe architecture. I can reiterate what you presented, will allow me. And Yasha, you showed in a way also the development of your practice, your research technology, and how it shapes different kind of architecture or the research result. And I would like to ask you, could you or can we at this moment imagine what will be the architecture of AI?
I think that's exactly what. I don't think we know. And I don't think there is such an architecture. It's like there is no architecture of computation. There are techniques that are enabled by computation, and then maybe they somehow shape architecture. Usually not, as we saw. The practice is not that inclined to take our advice into account. And with AI, it's just, we just don't know. It's too early to tell. If I want to be pessimistic, I say it's just going to be more of the same, because machine learning tends to look at precedents and then generate according to what it already knows. So yeah, it's actually not a very promising perspective.
Thank you for the question. It's a hard one, but I think that when I started academia, I was called the digital architecture guy. Now nobody says digital architecture because it's just architecture. And now we are, I think, in the same place, say AI architecture. And I think in like 5 or 10 years, we're just going architecture because we clearly use AI. Everybody's using AI, and it's just architecture. So yeah, and what we're doing now, I think, we are still using AI. Like a guy showed the auto. We're using it like the drafting. We don't know how to use AI. I mean, we not a lot of people here were when we shifted from cameras to videos. But in the beginning, I don't know if you know, in the beginning, when you put a video in front of people, they're always standing like this because they were waiting for you to take a shot. So I guess that's what we're doing now. We're standing like this with our architecture and we're using AI like stills. So that's my answer. I think it will be evolved a little bit, and then it will just become architecture again. That's good.
I want to add something to continue. So I had this conversation with my wife, which she's also an architect, and I showed her this presentation. I said, "What do you think?" She said, and she talked, and she's an urban designer, and she had this thing about reading codes and sections, and I said, "But that's not AI. That's what you want." And I think that's part of the thing, right? That AI will kind of give you, like right now, everybody sees in it what we want. We don't really know what's there. So yeah, that's still not a question.
Yeah.
I would say that we're missing some very young students to also participate and answer this question. Because I'd say that this semester and also last year, I already had students in studio, at least at the phase of the conceptual design, they were presenting, their AI images. And it's amazing because you know, the first thing that, I mean, the first reaction internally, I did not dare to external that reaction was, no, sorry, no AI, please do all the conceptual, you know, that, in a different way. But then, the thing was to actually let them actually do it and promote it, but then be very critical about what they do and what they see. And I see this semester that it's working fantastic. I mean, if they learn how to become critical about it, they actually get it as a tool, as a new tool to be another tool as for the, at least for the preliminary design, for the conceptual design. So yeah, that was just regarding the AI.
I also just have a comment on the AI from a practical point of view. I fully agree that we are scratching in the surface, but the client also knows that AI are there, and we already see that it's coming out in tender now. That the client asks us specifically what kind of AI tools are we using, and they expect us to lower the fee because we can work smarter. So we need to have like a, especially on the space layout, the space planning and the fit out, that they know we can automate those processes. So we need that, we're standing in front of it and we need like answers.
Yes.
Yeah, and we need to know what tools. I think if you look deep inside, what's the difference in architecture? I mean, Duffy's student is now using AI, all this model to create. And look at Le Corbusier project and look at Frank Gehry's project. Look at them. Typologically, they're totally different. But topologically, in essence, the architecture didn't change. If you look at residential, it all looked the same. Just strip the lines, you know, the curved line. It's all almost the same. So we need to ask ourselves, what would be the big architectural change? Not the formal, not the formal change. And here, I'm not sure because people will, you know, will still stay straight, will still walk straight, and will be the same. People won't change that fast. So I think AI will give us a lot of data, a lot of ways to optimize the performance of our building, get to a building that work better, faster, and communicate better to building, but building itself like a machine, as an architecture, I'm not sure that it will change by AI.
I'm sorry, I was late. I don't know what the question was.
It's okay. I think we can continue now to the panel discussion. Just let me add one chair.
We did not start the panel, we just started.
Yeah.
I thought I was late for the panel. I wasn't.
But you were so enthusiastic to see that, I said, no, I won't stop.
Sorry, I misunderstood the situation.
So I would like to invite to the panel discussion, in addition to our distinguished presenters, our panelists in the seat, starting with Daphne, Associate Professor Daphne Fischer-Brinkmann. He's the chair, the head, the chair, the head of architecture visual participation.
Perception.
That's a very hard word for his friend. Perception lab at the Technion. She also served as the academic director of this lab and the head of the Center for Research and Development in architecture, which support us today very generously. Her research focused on visual analysis and simulation of urban and architecture space related to human perception and behavior. Our second panelist is Roy Yosefov. Roy is an emerging researcher, which will present at the session afterwards, so stay tuned. He's a researcher at the Visual Perception Lab, headed by Duffy. His work at the lab focused on developing analytic models for measuring and evaluating pedestrian visual perception in urban space based on physical urban parameters. And our last but not least panelist is Anat Moore. Anat is a computational architect and a product manager at Urban Dashboard Startup, which focused on revolutionizing early stage urban planning through advanced technologies and innovative design strategies. And that former research at the Technion, which we had a glimpse on, was in developing an interactive method for generating and evaluating of urban environments supervised by Professor Daphne Wirtzman.
That's not Fisher.
Fisher. Okay. So, thank you, all of you, for attending this panel. And so, as we mentioned a few times ago, this symposium stands on three pillars, as I see it. The environmental, urban, and computational. This leads a bit more, I would say, to the computational, because we've seen a lot of merges between the seats, as you mentioned, Bigger, which I think it's great, and I think it's a good direction that's, this combination of pillars merging. But I will ask three direct questions relating more to the computational, starting with our panelists, and then we will have time. I will add a few more general questions. But all other panelists, if you have any comments, feel free to join. Okay, starting with you, Daphne. Your work emphasizes on human perception in architectural and urban environment. How do you see the connection between the tools and the metrics that you develop at your lab for human perceptual in the context of the environmental and data-driven design process?
Thank you for, is it working?
No,
It's not.
I think it is.
Yeah, you hear me?
Maybe both.
Like this?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So thank you for the question. And I'd say that in some way, I feel that I'm just, like from a different story. In Hebrew, we have this, I think it's like a song. A lot of people coming from being a green person, and then they suddenly see a blue person, and they're asking him, how come you're a blue person? And he says, well, from a different story, but they meet in the same environment. So I'd say that it's a very similar feeling. I mean, at the beginning, many years ago in my PhD, I was looking for ways to quantify something that is completely subjective, you would say, the perceived density. I mean, saying that we are in a very dense environment or going to be in a very dense environment. So, we could say that this is qualitative data, but I was looking for, transforming the qualitative into quantitative. So this is one way that I feel that I'm very much connected to, other quantified metrics, like the ones that we've heard today. Also, like technically, I mean, what we do is we quantify how much we see and what we see. So in general, just saying that when you see a lot of space, of open space, and you also see a very nice view that you like, which is of course also subjective, but so then you would feel less dense, and you would feel that the well-being in general would be much higher. The ranks of well-being would be higher. And some parameters are very similar to the ones that you are looking at, like sky view, a lot of greenery and so forth. But when we look at greenery is when we assess it with less stressed environments, so that the persons would be less stressed. I mean, I could go on and talk a lot about that, but I know that later on we will show, like in the Pachacuti, we'll show some slides that will perhaps show some more information of what we're doing. So just to say that we wish that our models, our metrics would be on every designer's and every planner's desktop. To be part of the, comparable design when you're looking at a comparative alternative that you're designing. And also a part of the larger optimization, models when you actually use I mean, your models to also take our models, and so to insert also how people would feel and perceive the space. So that's just in general, I believe it's completely part of the work.
Any comment on that, or we can continue? Thank you, Daphna. Yeah, we'll continue to read. So you're representing here at this panel the young researcher and practicing architects with machine learning. So very related to the talk that we have in urban design. So how do you think those technologies can help us better understand and design cities in a way that respond to a real human experience? Because you're coming from also Daphne's lab.
Yeah, okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. So, I'm fortunate enough to have two heads of this week. One, I'm a researcher at Daphne's lab, and I'm also working as an architect at the Denmark in urban design. And from my experience as an urban designer, most of the pain points I have, which machine learning could help, is with data collection, which is something that on a large scale is an issue. And also, in the previous presentation, we talked about surrogate models, which would help analysis become quicker, which is also something that would help the day-to-day practice, especially in urban design. So these are two main points. I also think that machine learning models, they could provide good enough solutions in quick time that would allow feedback in the planning process and allow design iterations, which is something that currently in practice it's hard to achieve due to the time that some analysis take. So yeah, it's
Thank you, Reed. And we'll continue with the third last direct question to Anat. And you're coming from, I would say, practice, but
Not practice.
it's not practice, right?
Something weird.
Something in between.
Architecture startup. It's a stupid thing to do in terms of business model.
Okay, no good.
But yeah, some people do strange stuff.
So, but I do want to address that and your current work role in this weird position, as you say, but very interestingly coming from academia and maybe relating to what Pega shows. How can you maybe talk a bit about the interaction that you have with firms, architectural firms, and municipalities?
So in Urban Dashboard, we're trying to integrate technology into the early phases of urban design, especially for redevelopment projects. And ironically, the early stage where I think most important decisions in terms of the designs are made, because it's influence our life for hundreds of years to come. And this phase is the least digitized of them all, because later on the process, there is technology already integrated in the processes, like in detailed planning, where we already have BIM and we have optimization processes. In the early stage, I interviewed personally hundreds of professionals from the industry as part of my work. And some of them still use for masses design, for like the really initial stage, they still use PowerPoint as a tool. And so I think it's very important to understand how critical is this phase and changes later on. Usually when you implement a very sophisticated assessments like environmental assessment or any kind of assessments, it's usually done later on in the process where changes are costly and sometimes they are not feasible at all because you stuck with what you decided at first and you tried to assess it only later on. And not usually you don't go back. So I think in this field we have several gaps we need to fill. One of them is data. We talked about it earlier. I think in other fields we have a lot of data because we can just use the World Wide Web as data source, but in architecture we don't have data sets that are up to date and accurate to work with. And the other challenge is professionals feel very comfortable with their workflows. And it's very hard for them to embrace any change at all. So I think it's a very great challenge to get people to embrace change, even if they know the benefit of it. So I think in my opinion, in terms of AI, we are still very technologically far from the point where proposal that comes from AI and generative design will overcome the proposal that comes from a skilled human planet. We're not there yet, but we can empower professionals with tools that can help them to assess very early in the stage what their actions are doing. I mean, if they will have like augmented vision of what each and every action that I'm doing is, what are the consequences in terms of economical consequences, environmental consequences, any kind of aspect, I think it will do a great change because it will help them to do better decisions very early and in every part of the process they do. They just know what are the consequences and they just can to focus on the values they want to bring into the table.
Can I add to that? Just to promote your paper on her master's. Anat actually proposed breaking out, what do you say, the black box.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is something, I mean, Guy mentioned your masters, but this is something I think more than the environmental design and so forth. So, and then that could be like an open source, like an open model, adding up more layers. And another thing that I forgot to say earlier, according to our lab, is that next month we're going to Kupu. I don't know if somebody's going to be in Kupu in UCL. We're going to present our toolkit and do a workshop. So maybe later we could do it here before you go to UCL doing your PhD. Yes.
I think we can have one question if there is from the audience. And
My name is Ryan, and I'm obviously also environmental assessment of urban design and buildings. And I want to tell you about the discussion I had with a member of the Vatmal, and it's a planning committee or the major committee, the planning committee in Israel. And we're part of the plans a very big neighborhood, the scale of the new city. And they want to plan it in 1 year as a whole, very fast. So it's not going to work, but and we told them it's not going to work, but that's the goal and that's the definition of their task, and they're going to do it anyhow. And they asked us, so we suggested and they agreed that we'll put several criteria to measure how good can we make the plan? How can we make a better city? So they asked us, and we suggested a very big list of criteria we think we should put inside the big city. We did some research and we find out several of them. So they took a look at that and they said, no way. And I think they said it not only because they are doing it very fast, because it's something that came up from most of your presentations. You can't, they're telling something very logical. They're saying, basically, we can't focus on big lists of criteria. A computer or AI might do that, but we as human beings or designer or planners, we set up the criteria, we need to do only certain things. We or let's say at least on the first stage, which we decide the main decisions. We can later on add some more multi-species design or ecological city, but we can't do it in the beginning. In the beginning, we can focus on 2, 3, 4, 5 criteria and try to mix them all together and try to grasp them into a good scheme and so on. So what my question is, and whoever wants to answer can do that, how can you basically do that? How can you say those and those criteria, which that's what they can. They can do only several of them, and only several can change or that can impact on the main decisions. How can you decide what is more important and what is the one you really need to focus in? Let's say let's accept what they're saying. That's what they can do. Okay, so that's my question.
I would.
A hard question.
It's a hard question. I think that architecture and architects are the artists of trade-offs. And each decision you have, you gain some and you lose some. And in every aspect, if you gain some in the economical aspect, you probably will lose some in any other aspect that we like. I mean, the taller the building is, the more profitable it is, but the less in the other
Values.
yes, valuable aspect. And I think the problem is the trade-off is not a technological problem. It's a human perception problem. We cannot measure too much criteria in the same times and create like a good trade-off vision of them. So I think it's the question. I'm not going to answer your question specifically, but I think that each and every presentation we just saw one simulation each time. How can I do one simulation? But I think it's very important to understand how can we do many simulations at the same time and understand how they affect each other and how can we assess what's more important. I think it's a very important topic to investigate.
I agree, it's very important. And I would say that also architects would rank it differently. It's kind of a personal, I think.
Yes.
And I think that the way is, I mean, to weight it, like to give different weights, is to do a collaboration and assessment. And I mean, we focus on visual perception, focusing on perceived density and other well-being that are more emotional and the way that you feel about the environment. But for instance, if we do a collaboration, we talked about many years ago, then we could have, and then by assessing people's, the way that they actually personally weigh them, and then statistically, we could decide which would be the, sorry about my voice, the weight. But that could be, I mean, also there is a question, what about Israel? What about Singapore? What about Eindhoven? What about different places around the world? It's a big question. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I think this is absolutely, I agree with this. There are very established methods in different fields. There are very established methods in decision sciences, in operations research, etc., which support very methodically this way of collecting data from many different stakeholders and weighting different criteria. Also, using these methods, these statistical methods, you can quite accurately determine from which kind of grouping or categorization that you want to do among the stakeholders, what would be the priorities for a certain groups of people. There are clustering techniques, there are many different ways of doing this, multi-criteria decision analysis, different methods to do this. So I think that the planning authority in this case could use could develop a participatory campaign to see which of these criteria they should focus on in their prioritization. That could help them a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. Candice.
Thank you.
You too. Bye.